You don't want your gas
Great.
on the double.
So, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, November
Oh, he's
4th,
here.
2019. And this is the Townwide Facilities Committee meeting, where our main topic is trying to agree on a centralized facilities management department for all of the town. So today's agenda, I apologize, I forgot to include the meeting minutes in your packet, so I'll have it in the next one. So we'll deal with that later. We're just briefly going to talk about the org chart, the MOU, getting an update from the different groups and how they're doing. And then the main topic is the discussion of the financial analysis that was completed by Molly Ahern, and I thank you very, very much for doing that. Then we can talk about a timeline going forward. So with that, I'm going to take it out of order so that we can not have the financial analysis be the only topic we talk about. So on the org chart, I included it because I know there was Maya had asked me to include it in an email because the school committee was talking about it and they just wanted to make sure they had the latest one. So for the past couple meetings, we have talked as a committee about ensuring that this represents what everyone sees going forward, at least from the start. I understand that as the years go by, there may be changes here, changes there.
But David, this is dated
Yep, that's last,
117,
Yes,
so it's a
that's-
117 issue, so,
right.
okay.
So that's the date that we approved it as a committee, and I just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with what we're proposing at this time. We know that this is really, if we move forward for fiscal year, next fiscal year 21, the management group will be dealing with this and trying to set it up the right way. The money regarding the actual budget in the employees would come the following fiscal year. So unless there are any
So,
follow-ups,
At
yes.
this point, we would be expecting that the facilities management director would be coming from, like, that would be covered partly in the school budget. I mean, I'm
this
talking
year.
about FY 21.
Yes.
Right, FY 21.
Yes.
And which other position?
You have his administrative assistant that I
Right.
think during the course of the next fiscal year, we would talk about transitioning to more of a business analyst or the next one up, which is the business manager. And so I'll have to leave that to between Paul, Dave, and Tony on the specifics of that. But we created the position based on what we felt were the needs of the department going forward. Who actually fills them, we'll leave that up to HR with,
I'm not asking for the people.
Right.
I'm trying to understand what each side is going to bring to the table. So I think this would need to be called out in the MOU. If we're saying that in order to make this work, we have to have these positions in place, and these 4 yellow highlighted ones need to be in place right away. I'm wondering where those are coming from, not people, but budgets and, which side is bringing what.
right. So as we get into fiscal year 22 and we talk about the dollars, I think there are 2 challenges. One, making sure that we identify the dollars on both sides, what contributes it, and depending on which endeavor we go through, whether it's a shared cost, a separate cost, that's going to determine, and I would.
I understand that
Right.
for FY 22, but my question is, if we are saying we need these 4 people in place to get the management part to start
Yep.
working, then currently the school has 2 of those people in their budget.
Right.
Is general government going to commit to putting the other 2 in their budget?
I don't
Who's
think
doing it?
there's any commitment to actually hire. I think what we want right now is for Paul, Dave, and Tony and HR to iron out a plan, and then they'd have to come back to the table, whether it's before us or to the FinCom, and how we're going to fund additional personnel that they want to bring on board before FY '22. So I don't think it's a case of anyone actually
I
committing.
thought we were all saying that we can't make this even start to work until we have these people in place. And maybe they're not all ready to go July 1, but I
Right.
think there needs to be some funding available in FY 21.
And we will have to make that funding available through our submission to the Finance Commission on our
So
facilities
you'll be
department.
putting together what it would cost and where it's gonna come from?
Yeah, we will have
as
to
a
do that,
package?
yes, yes. So if the schools are coming up with their 2 positions, even though it's gonna remain the same for next fiscal year, somehow we will have to present a finance on how we're gonna do it. What I wanna.
Which 2 positions are you talking about, David?
Well,
I know
the
what-
assistant director,
The assistant
assistant director
director,
is new.
which is the operations
operations
manager?
manager slash assistant
Okay,
director.
so, okay,
And the business analyst.
And the-
and the business analyst.
Mm-hmm.
And the facilities management would come from the schools?
Yep.
And the business analyst would come from the schools?
Business
No, the
manager.
business manager will come from the
The
school.
business, huh?
Manager comes from the school.
Oh, okay, so
Right, but
the
there would
4th
be-
position is the this one, the business agent analyst?
Yes.
So that's the one that would come from the town?
Right,
Yes.
but you also have theoretically an increase in salary for the facilities management person and the business manager.
Right,
person.
and
Yeah.
we'll have to cover that as well, somewhere.
Right, so it's
right.
2 new positions and increasing the responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
and compensation for 2 positions.
Yep.
For FY '21, it's remaining the same, is that what you're saying?
Well, for FY '21, the budgets as they exist for personnel would remain
That's
within
what I
your
mean.
budget.
Okay.
But as we slowly transition in this next fiscal year to the management end of it, we would have to come up with funding for the positions that we're creating or upgrades to existing personnel positions.
But as we do this budget, we're sticking with the 2 people we have in
Correct.
our budget?
Yes,
Okay.
Some portion of them.
right.
Only some portion of them?
Well, that, hopefully, we agree, and we're saying beginning July 1st, that
It's a management
Paul
thing.
is in charge of all town buildings. Therefore, his salary would have to increase from where it is today. So we're gonna have to find those funds, but first, we're gonna have to have HR do their analysis of what that
Sure.
amount should be and all the rest, but, right, so we have to account for those funds.
So Dave, when you say, because sometimes I suffer from sometimers, when you say July 1st of 2020, the management structure's in place.
Yes.
Does that mean, and the facilities department is in charge of all buildings?
Yes.
But does that mean it actually starts then? In other words, Kathy Connie's gonna call me and say, Paul, can you do X, Y, and Z and get it done? Because my understanding was we were gonna have some more Indians. So, as I put that budget together, the staffing, I mean, not the budget. So as I looked at it, the assistant director, and then we hire an electrician, and then we have a plumber, and we have, but we never addressed the carpentry and the labor end of this thing. Because that's, so if you think about, the town already has a plumber now. And between Kathy and I, we're already spending money for alarms and fire alarms and security alarms, and that money will go towards electrician. But the big one is the carpenter and a laborer or 2. Because right now, we're keeping that person, those 2 people, busy in the school department all the time. So the worst thing that we can do is start this, the phone rings, and the reasonable expectation from Kathy is she's gonna get some service.
Well, Paul,
So
so remember,
that-
as of July 1st, where we have maintenance lines for plumbing repair, HVAC repair, those aren't going away as of July 1st. So to smooth things out on July 1st, yes, it's a combined facilities department, but if I have $10,000, I'm making the number up, I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, budgeted for town hall repairs, that's still there. So that's sort of your discretion that, okay, it's a sink is broken, let me just call the plumber and hire them. So the resources aren't going away. What we feel we'll see down the road is, do we decide that, all right, you know what, now we can hire an extra plumber, or we hire a half-time plumber. So all the money the town's currently spending on its facilities isn't going anywhere. So don't feel like, uh-oh, all of a sudden, you're picking up 9 more buildings, and you have no additional resources. We may not have that body there on July 1st, but we're not gonna say, oh, get rid of all the plumbing, electrical, and HVAC repair lines, and you're one plumber and one electrician have to do it all. So what we'd hope to see in time, what you'll probably see is we'll either replace those costs with an added body, or you might say, you know what, I'm okay with one body, but rather than, you know, $50,000 in repair costs on the town side, I'm gonna take that into a central budget. I can still do it with one electrician, because I wanna get X on a service contract. Or you know what, I wanna be able to call somebody to do A, B, and C, because it's much cheaper and easier to do it, and my girl or guy is gonna do D, E, and F. So part of it's just sort of seeing where we go, but those resources aren't going away. So don't think like all of a sudden, the one plumber that we have district-wide needs to now pick up 9 extra buildings. We think eventually we'll either go to 2 buildings, or that person will be doing all the buildings with now a large repair budget under him to decide, okay, you know what, this is something that I contract out, this is something I wanna do.
So I'm not worrying, let me just clarify, I'm not worrying about plumbing, because right now plumbing
Whatever the trade
is
has to
being
be,
hit.
though.
So the biggie to me is electrician, and the big is carpentry and a laborer. Those are the biggies, because, you know, we can't deliver the service unless we add some Indians. And I think if we go back to Joe McDonough, one of the reasons it failed in Wellesley is because they didn't add enough bodies coming out of the chute. And everyone retreated, and then they waited for 2 years, so
Right,
that's.
but similar to what Tony was talking about for the plumber, that would apply to any of the services. No one is telling you on July 1st to take your electrician out of the schools and now he's got to deal with 9 other buildings. That's probably not going to happen. I think, you know, the resources of using outside electricians to deal with a lot of the stuff in the town buildings until there's a more or a better plan in place on how we're gonna deal with bodies and costs and contracts. So I think what we're seeing is in year one, from a budget perspective, we're not operating too much differently than we are today. We're just trying to centralize the management piece and making sure that the plan is in place so that when we jump into fiscal '22, that we're able to do so because we have the bodies in place by that time, or a plan in place on how we're gonna get there.
Right, I think as we've envisioned, we know that we're trying to similar to what Wellesley did, we need to begin to address the big backlog we have town-wide facilities. I mean, as I tell everyone, if you look at our capital plan, there's millions of dollars of just fixing stuff that's gotten old. I mean, you can call it an investment, but there's very little in there that's actually something that's new that we don't currently have, or a true investment, it's just repairing what's there. So what I'd like to see down the road is, you know, we're gonna rely on you and whoever ends up being your predecessor in 10 or 15 years when you retire, to say, hey, you know what, I want 2 plumbers to do all the plumbing work in the district. Or
Right.
somebody might say, you know what, I don't want any plumbers at all, it's much better for us to just contract it out, or vice versa. HVAC is the same thing. When you look at some of the costs across the entire community, we know we can probably get more labor for less cost by hiring in-house with some of
Right.
these things. But we want ultimately the facilities department to say, you know what, it's really that maybe the cost of hiring certain trades at certain times. We want a big service contract, or maybe we don't want a big service contract. Or let you say, you know what, I want 2 employees and a very small service contract. See how it's working and what ultimately works best.
But who will make that decision? You?
I think we're gonna rely on the facilities director the way we would any of our department heads on what do you really think is the best, and then we'll you go through the FinCom, you go through town meeting and say, you know what, we're spending $250,000 a year on
Well,
plumbing
it
repairs.
sounds like though you've got a budget already. And are you afraid that you have an order to fill and you won't get that money because
No,
it hasn't been released
my-
yet?
My concern is twofold. Is being able to, A, deliver the service, because there will be a huge expectation, I believe, on the town side, when and if this is announced. So that's a real concern. The second concern is, from the school side, is not to have a loss of service, level of service. And all I'm saying is, we need these 4 people that are in yellow, I believe. We all believe that. But we also need some Indians to do, and I shouldn't be saying that, but we need some
Different term,
workers,
yeah.
we need some workers to be able to provide the service to maintain the school level and to improve the town end, so that their expectation is something that's gonna happen. And what we talked about is the efficiency of having an employee versus a contract. So if we look at, just for the sake of the conversation, the plumbing contract, you know, we're spending about $100,000 a year combined, I think. And
More than that.
and that's for probably, on average, maybe 20 hours, 25 hours a week of that plumber. If we had an employee and you had them for 40 hours, there's much more efficiency that employee can help out in the other trades or the other jobs that need to be done.
So it's
And I
this
see
year,
that-
it's this full year.
Yeah.
The management year that you're concerned that you've got to call, you've got to fix something.
Right.
And you don't have a plumber
And-
because you can't release
right.
the school plumber.
And I see the first year, or part of the first year, is the most important, the
You're right.
kickoff. Because then you're building up credibility. You know, Kathy and I can get into discussions and disagreements on our own. We don't need to add on top of that the expectation that services are gonna be delivered better than they are now. So
So is-
that's my big concern here.
So is that saying that we should start full blast right out of the
I
chute,
am
as I
su-
said, of doing this?
I am suggesting
Yeah.
you should start with some more people to do the actual work on the ground. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying, we already have the plumber in a contract. Whether he stays in the contract or becomes an employee, the electrician replacement for the person that would probably be the assistant director is a vital position in all of our buildings. And then the next level, the vital position, is we have one carpenter / locksmith. He can't pick up all of the buildings. And, you know, we would spend, excuse me, more money, I think, contracting out for that. Because you get into prevailing wage, but when you hire the employee, it's not in prevailing wage. So, and then another laborer, so you end up with kind of two carpenters and a laborer.
Okay.
That helps
We need-
out.
we
So
need to
that's-
take- I understand, but we need to take a step back. When we reviewed this in detail, we sort of laid out a plan of what we're going to do. And we have the plumber identified as an immediate need, and we have the HVAC as a future need.
Right.
We didn't talk about increasing the electrician or carpenters. We did talk about maintaining the electrician. So whether you're, the existing
Right.
electrician takes it, we still backfill. So I think you go from there, Paul, and you build up as needed, but you have to do the analysis to say, where is that funding gonna come from? Are we gonna save it from contract reductions? I think that's one of the reasons why we thought the plumber would do. We spend, I think it was $135,000 to $140,000 on plumbing.
Yeah.
And the cost we could probably get between 75 and 100 for an employee, there's immediate savings right there. So I think that's, we have to look at that for every position to say, before we add a second electrician or a second carpenter, where are our expenses in? Because once you have an employee, you know that's forever. It's, you're not gonna get rid of the person. So we have to get over, are we looking at a 1 year, 2 year window of expenses to bring us up, and is it worth contracting it out? Or is this a really long-term need where an employee would keep us there for, you know, a long, long time? I don't know, but I think we are all in agreement that we want to start it right. And I think that's part of the rationale of just doing the management in year one, is to make sure that the development of the plan, whether it be for the worker bee side or the management side, is taking off on July 1, and then you got really 12 months to, less than that, in my opinion, to work it out, because you, as soon as the budget consolidation happens, that's when, you know, potential issues could come up regarding resources or efficiencies, but we have a year to do that. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, my biggest concern, Dave, is service. To be able to provide a service. And I'm not sure, and I'll admit, I sat down and did this, and the more I look at it now, I'm not sure at the level we're gonna start. And as I say, the first year I think is huge. That we're gonna, I would rather see some employees that, whether it's year one or year two, I don't think there's anyone around the table that's gonna say we don't need them. Given the ages of our buildings, given the conditions of our buildings. So I just think we'd be a little bit short-sighted and not going a little further as we kick this thing off.
So
And
Paul, let me
getting-
ask you, sorry, go ahead, Judy.
and getting those people in place, you
Right.
mean, on the
Kick it
payroll,
off. Yeah.
without going out to
Right,
contracted
right,
services.
right.
So you would rather have that year one than year two?
I would rather have that as the kickoff.
Okay, we
yeah.
can make that happen, because what we're gonna do on the general government side, was planning on dumping all of our facility costs into one budget anyway. So that makes it easier to say, okay, I've got an electric repair line of $130,000, we can just build that budget as, here's the estimated cost of the employee, and here's, whatever's left becomes the contracted services, you still need some contracted
Supplies,
services.
Supplies. yeah.
Right, the supplies I'm not as worried about, but whatever, what's our electric repair cost? It's around $100,000, right?
Yeah, it was even, around there.
So, instead of having it, the way we budget it is it would say, electric repair costs and then by building, so we have some idea, but it would all be in one line. Because similar to the schools, the town should have the flexibility that if I have a breaker box go at the fire department versus at town hall, and now I'm going to the FinCom or town meeting to say, all right, I've got $9,000 left over there in electric repairs, but I need the money over here, and we're just, no offense to Tom, but it seems like sometimes we do accounting just because we love to do accounting. But that'll all go in there. It's just as easy to say, okay, if there's $100,000 in there and the salary is $60,000, and I don't know, I'm making it up, it's now a salaried position and that's what's left, and we see how it works out. If in the middle of the year we find out that we couldn't hire somebody for that salary, or it's not working, we still need a repair cost, we go back to the FinCom at a town meeting and say, hey, we wanted to start off good. We can get the personnel board to get job descriptions ready and posted and ready to go prior to town meeting. So we can start the process and do it right around town meeting, tell people it's obviously contingent on town meeting approving the whole thing. But that way we could tell people the goal is to have you start by February 1st. God only knows where my mind is right now. July 1st, thank you. If that's what everyone wants to happen, we can make that happen. We just gotta decide that that's what we wanna do, and we'll go and we'll make it happen.
But I can understand Paul's concern. I mean, this isn't, really clear. It's multiple steps and multiple people.
We all love
and-
him, we think so highly of him, and he would
Yeah,
never
but,
wanna do
he's
anything where we
thinking
didn't
if
think so
he
highly of him.
screws up, if he screws up,
Yeah.
that's a bad mark.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not worried about, I appreciate that. I'm not worried about myself.
I know you're not.
I'm worrying
About the
worrying
service
about
level to the
service level
department, I know.
increasing on the town side
Mm-hmm.
and at least maintaining on the school side.
Well, I think as Paul was saying too, is that the general gov side is kind of wondering, are we going to just, those of us who are building managers, on July 1, are we,
Yeah,
here you go, Paul, and we can get back to purchasing or fire department or whatever it is. And
I mean,
I
it's still-
think that's Paul's concern
Right.
is, are we just going to say goodbye, good luck, Paul, and, like
a
you said.
transition.
Somebody's
No, I mean, it's still-
I don't know who's gonna call
it's still the
Paul to say
department.
things aren't working.
It's a
but-
transition.
It's still the department head's building, so I mean, on February 1st, on July 1st, sorry, I don't think Travis the rec is always gonna say, oh, my roof is leaking, well, I guess I gotta wait for Paul to walk through the building and do something about it.
No, but I
And
think they're
because-
wondering, are they gonna be calling Paul and just say, like people call me now in town hall, this is not happening, well, I get it done, well, am I gonna be saying, Paul, guess what, this isn't happening, you get it done?
Yeah, administratively, we can take care of that. We'll probably have a weekly meeting with Paul and I where if there's not an immediate issue, we'll sit there and wait to escalate things up so that all of a sudden on July 1st, they don't just go ahead and only call Paul when there's an issue. I mean, like when we have a facility issue here, you talk to somebody, you talk to me, what should we do? And it may be that the department head calls me and I might say, yeah, call Paul, it's a little bit more of a complicated issue. Or, okay, the roof is leaking, call a roofer and, I'll call Paul. So that I think we can work with. Your point of wanting the tradesmen sort of ready to go to make this
Right.
work,
Do we have a work order system that would be able to track
we,
some of this?
we have, on the school side, we have, it's called School Dude, which is used throughout the country in a lot of municipalities. The town side doesn't have a work order system.
So
But
we'd have to
Munis-
convert
Munis
that.
has the ability.
Okay, so
Munis has
I want to
the
derail that
ability.
subject because we all agreed a while ago that we would let the director work with
Make the
Dave
decision.
and Tony to find the system that's appropriate for Norwood. I don't want to get back and try to
Right.
re-argue that discussion because I know there are differing opinions, but we left it that it was going to be the director, Dave, and Tony to work out which system would work best for Norwood. I
Right.
would just rather leave it that way. I understand there's frustration. There is an existing system on one side, there isn't on the other. There are reasons why they say that we can't do school dude right this second. Okay, so you know what? Let the administrators argue it out afterwards, but.
But the
that's-
administrative mechanics in this, there is a way to track all these things.
Oh, absolutely.
And to put all that in,
Yes.
and to
Yes.
keep track of it,
It
and
has
to
pull
be,
out
right.
reports
It has
and
to
all
be.
that.
Yes.
That's in place
Yes.
at your place.
Okay. So,
So-
we're all
Can I ask
okay.
again
Yes.
about, only because we're coming into budget season and this is the first that I've heard that we're gonna be moving over in next year. So am I
No.
keep,
No, no, no,
No,
no,
No,
no, none of the expenses are moving over in FY '21?
no.
No.
Okay, so the school side is gonna be like, with regard to their expenses, it's gonna be the same
Same,
as
yes.
this?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted
Yes.
to clarify so that I don't,
We agreed
okay.
several meetings ago that as a transition, we would do July 1.
First
for
year
me.
is clear.
Right, the question right now is, you know, everyone has their budgets, but there's an increase in personnel.
Okay.
Where's that coming from? That's the question that's starting.
Well, Tony said he can take care of it.
So what we're looking at seeing some of the
February.
savings
I
of,
Done.
what we'll see from some of the savings will
Right,
fund
right.
some of those positions.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have to sit down between now and then and have a conversation. If you've got $50,000 in plumbing repairs and I've got 90, we might say, all right, can we just put the two of these together to fund that position? Because if I've only got $40,000 in HVAC repairs, that's not gonna be a full body, but we'll look at the total general government costs and think, all right, well, we'll move these three over to facilities costs. And, you know, if the number's off a little bit, we'll come back to the FinCom and get that adjusted as we think, okay, this'll work.
But this is going
We-
in effect July 1st of this next year. So we still have time to put stuff in the budget.
Correct, and that's why we had sort of at the outset, I had said, we kind of need a December 31st go or no-go date, because
Right.
how we build the budget and how
Right,
we
it's a lot
program it,
of
and how much we ride the personnel committee to get all their work done and get HR to get all this work done, and be ready, we can do all that, we just need that go date. Previously, we had, and we still would commit to putting the facility director's salary in the general government budget, as a way to making sure that there's no cost to the school, since it's ending up being effectively a general government department head position. We talked about that last year, so we'd still be willing to do that.
We'll leave that up.
Karen just
You have a
recorded.
deal?
We'll leave that up, what? Well, we'll leave that up to the schools. I mean, the offer's there. I don't think it
Why
really
would you
changes
say-
anything.
No, no.
Well, So, okay, we're also, I think we're all on the same page. Okay. MOU, I don't want to get into the details, what I would prefer is
Could I back
for,
up here on this little chart?
Sure.
There's something was said on here. This financial analyst, energy and security.
Mm-hmm.
Says this position will initially be filled half-time with the town of Sharon?
yes, so
So
we
what
is
actually
that?
have
We're
on
sharing,
the
we're
selectmen's
going to
agenda
be.
for tomorrow.
Oh, it's because of that connection
we
with
get-
the water?
No, it's
No,
not directly
no.
related to the water. We have some grant funds that we can use towards energy efficiency, and among the things we can do is hire an energy manager. We can't quite afford a full-time one with the grant funds, but
So we would
Sharon's
share it
also
with
with
them?
one.
Okay,
So we would
got
share
it.
with them, and just real quick, what we eventually envision with that is, so we'd be sharing an energy manager. It's just about ready to go. We'll probably post in the next month or so. Eventually, we may bring other towns into that sort of loop, because an energy manager ends up giving you see a lot in your energy savings and your facility savings. And after a couple of years, you know, they've had that big impact on your facility savings, and then there's not as much of a big impact. So what we figure is by the two of us sharing it,
It
we'll
would
get that
fade out.
impact. Yeah, and
Fade
as
out.
the, you know, it's not that the impact fades, it's just they come in, they save you a bunch of money, and then you're still employing them after you've already saved that money. So then we might look to add a third or fourth town to it, which is a good way to do it, and it allows you to hire a full-time person, because some towns end up rotating through numbers of part-time people. So we'll have that position on board probably sometime, maybe in the spring, and they'll be able to help the facilities department as well, because we envision them managing some of the energy efficiency projects. So if you've got a lighting project at the Balch School, it's, hey, the energy manager can deal with the lighting project at the Balch School. So that will be on board by the spring. That we were doing one way or another for energy management, but it's timely and it helps the whole
Okay.
process.
MOU?
MOU, I was just looking for feedback if folks have been discussing it with their boards.
So the school committee really hasn't gotten into this in detail, but I can tell you about my personal concerns.
Okay.
So on the fourth paragraph down, it talks about the facilities management director will have under its responsibility the staffing and like ability to hire, basically. And I understand this, but we do need to have a caveat that for schools, building principals have ultimate
The
authority.
appointing authorities don't change. I mean, when we say, I think when you say, you know, ability to hire, you can't delegate appointing authority, but you're sort of saying, you're gonna let the facilities person maybe head that process up, but if the principal's the appointing authority, if the manager's the appointing authority, that doesn't change. That's all set out statutorily.
Right, I mean, that's state law, we can't change that.
Correct.
then under the facilities management department, both the first and second things, there's like clauses that say until the Board of Selectmen and school committee agree to a different methodology. I think we should just strike all that language. I mean, I think that's implied, right? Any MOU is in place until you agree to a new MOU. And so I think it should be, number one should be the facilities director for all municipal facilities shall be appointed by the general manager and the school superintendent, period. The facilities director shall be jointly managed and evaluated by the general manager and the school superintendent, period. Then on the next page, I actually have a question for Karen, and I meant to ask you this in advance, so I'm sorry about that. But number 7 says that income received by the school department from leasing current schools will remain as income for the school department, which I love, but as I understand it, the current revolving fund that we have for where we take in rental money is limited, that we can only use that money to pay for utilities and custodial salaries and fees and overtime and stuff like that. But if we ultimately are going to take both the utilities and the custodians out of our budget, I don't think we can actually do that.
Is that what it is, Tom? And that's not what it was in my past. And
It's for the building.
Yeah, it's,
really
but
what it is.
anything to do with the building.
Okay, so maybe it is possible to keep it, we would just have to change the structure of that revolving fund or
Because
something.
we would,
'cause-
depending on how the school's bylaws say, the one in the school I was at previously was the rental money could be used for any facilities on the schools, but there are some towns that you can only use it for one, so I'm not sure how yours is written.
The
But
way,
even so, like, we're gonna have expenses related to that school, so.
Right.
right, the way they're usually written that way is so that you're not taking in, thousands of dollars over here and you're not paying out custodial overtime or anything like that for it. If we had a substantial rental, like when we had the lease up at the Savage Center, I think we'd have a conversation like that, but if somebody's renting out the gym for $200, it goes back to the school, whether in theory, you could say that the facilities department is absorbing the hit of that electric cost for that event, but short of a $100,000 a year lease, none of that's really relevant. It's all part of the ordinary
Okay.
operating budget. A really, really lucrative lease might be something where we gotta say, okay, if we're having custodians in or the building's operating on a Sunday at, full capacity, that's something different, where we might need to say, hey, you know what, some of that needs to go to the facilities budget.
Right, I mean, one of the things that we do is we rent out the high school auditorium for dance recitals, and those are often weekend events, and there's custodian overtime that's associated with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in that you would probably pay the custodial overtime, the actual facilities cost of it.
No, so
See, we did.
we have a rental agreement. And so they pay for the space.
Right.
And then they pay for the custodian overtime separately.
Okay.
Based on how many bodies they're gonna have in the building. That determines how many custodians they need.
Right.
So it's,
And the utility cost, again, unless it was substantial, I think just gets absorbed in the budget, because you almost can't spec that out anyway. That's what you're getting the
No,
rental
no,
fee
no,
for,
no, I'm
so.
not.
Right.
So the custodial account, the custodial overtime would come out of where?
it comes out of, in a rental, we rent the high
Cost of
school out on
rental.
a Saturday, and let's say they take the auditorium.
Right.
They pay $250 an hour for the auditorium use.
Right.
They pay any overtime use, the custodians there on overtime, and we have a house manager
So the
who
facilities
runs.
department would be getting that money?
Right now, it goes into the revolving
Revolving
account,
account.
and Maureen bills out of that account to pay those bills.
But we also used it for repair of the facilities.
Yeah.
Right.
But all
Like
that
say
money
your
will.
gym needed
Well,
the
but
floor.
Sure, but all
done.
that money will eventually be
Right.
going into the facilities department.
Not the revolving fund,
We
money. So if
kept
you remember
it
what Wellesley
in
also
schools.
said is they would sometimes, the facilities department would go to them and say, do you have money for this? I mean, we think of a repair or something was broken and then we're repairing it, but, example where you would maybe take money out of it is maybe some chairs in the auditorium broke and it's, hey, well, we've had a lot of rentals, let's fix the chairs in the auditorium, or things you want to do. But the schools would otherwise keep that money and it's really for anything in the building, so it
Okay.
might be, hey, you know what, we want new lights or something, where the
Right.
facilities department's gonna say, that's nice that you want something new, but it's not part of your, not part of your budget, or furniture for whatever room somebody happens to be using.
Well, let's get back to the paying of the custodian.
Well, I think,
How is that gonna be?
The person that
done?
rents it is basically paying for that custodian.
right, but
Right.
think,
Is the
what she's trying
facility
to say,
department
The
involved in that?
schools handle that, so basically the schools, Maya goes, okay, we got a contract
Okay.
for, a
Yeah.
custodian, they're gonna
All
call a
right.
custodian, and then we just do the general
I see your head
entries.
going, yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, it follows with the rental. So you rent it and that's the cost for the rental.
Right,
That's
I
how
know
I
that,
look at it.
I know
right?
that,
So
but
it goes with
And,
it.
a question of-
just so you know, we have 3 categories of rental agreements for space. custodians' costs are the same, but it's, in-school people, there's basically no charge. Town people, no charge except for the custodian. 100, outside, like the Norwood Basketball Association, 100% Norwood, it's one fee. And then and they're all nonprofit, then there's the outside and the for-profit, which then pay a higher rate.
So you're
it's
happy
broken
with
down in
this?
three yeah.
That what you heard?
That would work.
And then my last thing was just, I think it's important, if we're saying that we need certain things in the first year in order to make it happen, we should call out something about who's paying for what in that first year. I think that that's key to us agreeing to move forward.
But it did sound like Tony was saying, if we're adding a carpenter, we would just shift around our budget, right?
That's, well, for some of the carpenter would be tough, but I think the electrical and the plumbing, we might be able to do that. The other option we could do, if we wanted to, the first year to maintain the most flexibility for Paul, to maintain the most flexibility is those 2 or 3 trade positions that we think we can add by just cutting those lines out of the general government budget. We could keep those, I mean, we'll move them into one budget. We could keep those lines there, fund those positions out of free cash for 1 year. So 6 months in, we've got the flexibility, we've got the positions, but we're seeing what we're needing. And then we'll just have a more true number the following year. I mean, it's sort of 6 one way, half dozen the other way, whether we say, all right, let's just fund it out of free cash for the first year to see how it works and make sure we have maximum flexibility. Or at the special in the fall, we're going to the FinCom and going to town meeting and say, hey, you know what, we thought we could take $80,000 out of the electric repair line and hire an electrician, but it's just not working because A, B, or C. I mean, we can always fix whatever the issue is, the world's not gonna end, but just another way to,
So the bottom line is, we all better be glued to the hip and on the, with the same voice.
But we did just make a
To be
commitment not
supportive.
to use free cash for operations.
I agree, this would be sort of a one-time just to see, you know, kind of get it working. This isn't, going forward, that wouldn't be, I wouldn't want to, you know, if it wasn't our policy, I wouldn't want to use it, but it might just be to give us that flexibility year one. But the other side is if the FinCom understands that, and we have to go in September and say, you know what, we need another $50,000, because we just, you know, you're kind of guessing at a number here. Either way.
Are you okay with that? At least for discussion
Yeah,
purposes?
the more we talk, the more complex it gets, and the what-ifs. I agree with Maya. I said, you know, maybe have an addendum to this and outline each of the pieces and the estimated costs. I think it's got to be clear of where all these lines are and how much money is being put aside and is needed. And it's only for 1 year,
Right.
because the budget, whichever way we select it, will come for fiscal, you know. But
Okay.
yet, we shouldn't overwork it either. I mean, get down to the penny. I
Yeah,
mean, conceptually, we're all on the same page here.
Okay.
We want it to work, especially him. He wants to provide that service, bang.
All right, I'll work with Paul in trying to outline an addendum to this.
Okay.
As long as we're going not to stop what we're doing to wait, but we will add something that would outline those positions and potential costs and where that, the funds will come from for year one, okay?
The expectation is still that this is signed by the end of the year.
Yes?
So we have tonight and 3 more school committee meetings until the end of the year.
So that's why we've been asking everyone to review, and if you come back for wording changes,
Which we have been, and we have been mentioning it to the committees.
So-
But when, I'm just trying to think of our long-term agenda and making sure this gets on there and we have enough time. I think right now, it's on for our first December meeting, which is like
okay?
the 5th or something, somewhere around there. And I know you have another meeting set up for us later in November as this committee. What are you thinking then?
I-
In terms of when are we
First of all,
convening in
this,
December, when will we get the addendum?
all these addendums and
Yeah.
updates will be ready within the next couple of weeks before our next meeting, so that
Okay,
you folks feel comfortable enough at your first meeting in December to vote on. I mean, I have a couple requested changes, I've taken them. We'll add this.
okay.
Anything on the FinCom side?
I think it's important that we look upon this of how we can do it without getting down to pick. And we're not getting to, I mean, this is not pick, don't consider this pick. But really push to get that commitment so we can get off on the foot at January 1, right? For putting everything together for 7/1. implementation.
Correct,
I mean,
that-
we could sit here and find issues all the way through here, just like we're talking, well, do we use Munis, or do we do this one, or what? You know, we gotta cut the mustard at some point and say, it may not be perfect,
And
but
that's
we're
where
gonna
that-
make it happen.
Absolutely, Judy. That's where that December 31st date came from, is at some point,
Right.
somebody has to tell me to make this happen.
Right.
We can't continue to talk about it until the night before town meeting and then say, okay, we finally reached resolution on the night of town meeting, and then, by the way, put this together in 3 weeks and hope for the best.
But I also want to say that, you know, disagreement and anything that may go right or wrong, it's not the end of the discussion. If we're all committed to making this work, we're all gonna come back at the table and say, okay, we need to fix something here, and issues come up, so we're going to fix it. We're not gonna say, oh, well, you signed it and this is the way it is, and that, no, that's just it, you have to live with it until everybody, that's not the way I envision working. I envision working that we're trying to outline how we think it could go from day one. But we know as it gets up and running that there may have to be a shift here, a shift there, and we all have to be
A little
willing to
tweak
say,
here, a little tweak
let's go,
there."
let's get it done. So,
That's why I say we should be all joined at the hip
Okay.
as we march through
does
this
the
water.
Finance Commission, have they talked about this at all?
Pardon me?
Has the FinCom talked about the
No,
MOU at all?
they haven't even seen it.
Okay, so looking for
But
feedback.
we're not signatory to this.
No,
However, we're the only ones that can put it on the warrant, so.
Before,
The FinCom is 100% behind this. Maybe you haven't seen
and-
everything on
and
here.
so is the Board of Selectmen. The
And
Board of
so is
Selectmen
the Board of
are
Selectmen.
comfortable moving forward with it. So
I
if
mean,
there
the
are tweaking,
FinCom has
we'll
wanted this for
tweak,
years,
so.
so.
when, I know when we did this in Clinton, the first year, the budget stayed status quo. The second year, I sat with the facilities and we kind of set up the budget. We worked together on the budget on what we thought was going to be moving over. So I don't know, but that's how we did it. There was some wording in there just saying that during that first year it's going to be status quo, but during the second year that the facilities director and the business manager and the town are going to sit together and figure out a plan on the separate budgets that's going to be moving over. Because also have, like, I know NOAA does it a little differently with your percentages and everything, but there has to be some way to distinguish what portion of it is the schools and what portion is it of the towns. And I know it's a little different the way you guys do it, but when you're building the budget on the second year when you're moving over, I think it's important to sit together and be able to.
Well, at that point, it'd be really clear, because we'll
Right.
have a third budget, either wherever it
Right.
is.
Well, we'll have a third budget, which I do think will help, but I think that one of Karen's concerns is that at the end of the year, she then has to report to DESI how much was spent on schools.
Right.
And so she needs to then be able to go back into the facilities budget and tease out
Isn't that what
what
Munis
part
comes
of.
in?
I mean, even
If
the
it's set
current
up
system could
properly.
do that. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll be able to make that work fairly easily, where our different lines will be what the X is. I mean, an electrician who's working between two, I mean, we'll just have to, other towns have built a model there to decide you cost out.
Absolutely,
half
I
for
think
half.
it's just asking to be part of the conversation, right?
Right. I
think we can make that
Set
happen.
I can add that in.
Yeah.
Karen.
I think that,
Not an issue.
Because we also have
But
to
I like
build
my,
the budget and know which portion of it is going to be going over to the town side. So, and, like, that's why I'm asking questions now, because we're going to begin the process of building our budget now. So, the more detail you know about what is going to be taken out, the more you're
Well,
able
you
to
sort of
plan
have the
better.
outline that that you and
No, I understand this year it's staying the same, but
Right.
that's
But
why I'm
you have
talking
the
about
outline
next
of
year.
what would come over
Right.
from the categories. I'm not talking about specific dollars, because
Right.
it does change from year to year. But the report that you reviewed with Paul and I sort of outlines the lines
Right.
that would,
Move
are
over.
considered facilities. We're not looking to add or subtract. It is what it is on
Right.
those particular items, and that's what we're talking about,
Okay.
okay? Okay, last but definitely not least, I may have to leave while you guys are still talking about this, so I'll ask,
No, when you leave, we'll just say done.
David, you go, we're all right.
So we Maya, myself, Molly, no, you weren't there, were you? No, you weren't there, Tom was there. We met to discuss, the analysis that was requested, based on, the 5-year projections that were dealt with last spring. And there were 3 scenarios that were asked to be run. One is, if the status quo, what would the budget look like for both the schools and general governments? if it was part of a shared cost budget, how would that affect the schools and general government? And if it was a third budget totally separate, how would that affect the schools and general government? So I will not be able to explain as good as Molly can, but you do have the sheets, and I'll just ask her to go through them.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So actually, if you want to flip to the very last page, I think we can just briefly look here for a second. This is the summary of the facilities-related expenses. So it pulls it out so you can see the top there, facilities-related expenses in the schools, and then facilities-related expenses in general government, just so you can get those subtotals. And then total expenses in schools and general government, it's about 6 million in FY '20.
So the blue is basically saying within the general government, like for instance, Council on Aging, we only have one salary account for Council on Aging. And so this is the custodian salary that was pulled out of that.
Great, thank you, because that was the part where I was like, I don't know what to do with this number.
Yeah, so same with, police and library salaries. So-
Great.
So, but if you actually get the Excel file, each of these numbers that Molly has comes right from the 5-year projection. That's, you can trace where the numbers came from.
So,
Are these budgeted expenses?
These are budget
Yes.
projections for the next 5 years.
Okay.
this was these were the projections that we used to figure out how much the override should be. So that was what everything was kind of based on. One thing I noticed when you pulled this apart like this is, if you look at what the schools were projecting for increases year to year, we were projecting more than 3% increase in facilities numbers each year, and the general government was projecting less than 2.5% increase year to year. And I'm curious about that. I'm concerned about that, frankly, because I know that on the school side, we said we expected our salaries to go up roughly 2.5% and utilities to go up 5%. So I'm wondering how comfortable you are with the general government projections that it's going to go up less than 2.5%.
I mean, that was
I
based
think-
really,
I think the salaries are 3.5, right, Molly?
So it's,
And then the other stuff, I guess, I'm not exact, I don't remember, it was a year ago, what we use for a basis for the, like, one of the big numbers there is the $451,000 of maintenance on the police and fire station, right? So that's probably, it looks like a low percentage. But that's
So
probably
you're-
based on,
part of it, sorry if I could, is the school's costs are more in the utilities because you have more facility staff.
Sure.
Ours are more on the contract, so that was sort of based on a trend analysis of the contract.
Okay. Okay, good.
but I mean, we could increase it, like if yours goes up 3.5%, we can make these 3.5% too. It really kind of, in one sense, doesn't matter. It's more the whole ratio of, we're gonna, well, it depends how this works, but basically saying if we shift all this 4,700,000 over, you're gonna be saving a lot more money than the general government, right? To shift over. Good, you'll see that more on
Okay.
the other pages.
So look at the 3 scenarios. The first one is the status quo.
So that's basically just saying, after the override, because more of the override money went to the schools, instead of a 55-45 going forward, it would be approximately 58-42. And then from that, we tried to compare everything to this budget. So a lot of numbers on this page, Molly, give me your
Yes.
best shot.
All right, so we'll start with the first squared off box there.
okay.
So this is when we're looking at the school budget. Well, first, let me start at the top. So this is the effect if we shift facilities costs to a shared expense. So if you look down under facilities line.
Can we just back up
Oh,
just
yeah.
1 minute, especially for Karen's sake, because she wasn't involved. So one of the things we did at the Budget Balancing Committee is we started with overall revenue of the town, less kind of what we call fixed costs, shared cost, and then whatever's left, then we would divide up in a ratio between the
Okay.
general government and schools. So that's what that
The
top line is the
58-42.
revenue, And then the next line is that whole group should equal the same as the front page, which was $114 million of shared costs. And now it's up to 120 because Molly's added the 6,114. So in other words, if we counted that as a shared cost, that would lead, I don't want to.
No,
Right,
you're
right,
fine. So like Tom said, we added the facilities as a shared cost, which brings our total expenses up. Therefore, what becomes available to be divided amongst the percentages there is now 79 million. And if we stick with the 58% schools, 42% general government, we get those numbers, the 46 million and the 33 million. So when we do it that way, it appears a net increase in available funds to the school to be approximately $1,197,012, and a net decrease in available funds to the general government of the same amount.
So in other words, specifically 49,643,000 is the school budget on page 1. 49,643,118, but they would no longer have to pay for directly pay for the school facilities, so we're deducting that, so their, net budget that they'd have to worry about is 44,899. And so if we don't change the formula up above from 5842 to something else, schools would make out by $1,197,000, and then that same thing when you run through it in general government, because it's all one pot of money. If the schools are gaining by $1,197,000, general government would, quote, lose by that much money. But then so explain the next section.
So then, if the goal is to reorganize but not injure either school or general government, that would involve changing the percentages, and it would be 55% for the school and 45% for general government.
Hey, just where we started.
That actually isn't what I calculated.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Show us yours.
So, here, I can show you mine. Because it was really helpful once I got the numbers from Molly showing how the school stuff, the general government would break out. But clearly, I absolutely agree with Molly's numbers here that, if you kept it 58-42, then you've got this problem, but it makes no sense to keep it that way because general government can't lose $1 million and still do what they're doing.
Well, just real quick, that would be a one-year adjustment, though. I mean, so if you're showing a surplus on one side and deficit on the other side, you wipe it out so that there's sort of no harm the first year you do it. Your formula following year is you got to take into account that one side now has these additional costs, but it wouldn't permanently be shifting it, correct?
Well, I think if you pull out the general, I think so if it's shared expenses down here, then, and my numbers are slightly different because I was still using those original numbers, just less the the facilities numbers that Molly provided. But I think it would come out more like 43.5 for general government and 56.5 for schools. So I think it would be a new number, but not the 58-42.
Okay. We can certainly go through the specifics and do it, but I think conceptually what we're saying is the share cost, there would have to be some adjustment.
Right.
To keep both sides from pulling the hair out. Okay. In the third scenario.
The third scenario nets the same results as showing facilities as a shared cost.
So the only real difference between option 2 and option 3 is that if you take option 2, I'm going to call option 2, you're basically guaranteeing the facilities department
It's funded first.
that it's funded first, right? Whereas option 3 puts them in the same, if we have a 3% overall revenue increase, each of the department's going to have a 3% increase.
Which
So that would seem a more fair way.
right. And so I definitely agree with Molly's numbers here about this seems like a reasonable split if we were gonna do it in 3 piles. But the reason I did my spreadsheet was just because I was looking for based on this, I wanted to take it one step further and say, okay, so if you're looking at that sheet under the 3 departments, if, assuming that split that she suggests, 40.5% for general government, 52.5% for the schools, and 7% for facilities, if that was our plan going forward, you know, what would we think that our numbers would look like? How much money would be available? And then the next thing is, that's how much off is that from what we thought we were going to need based on
Right.
the projections that we had done before. So this shows that in that first year, general government would kind of come out ahead and facilities would come out under, but then over time, it kind of starts to even out a little bit. And it looks a little different with the shared expenses. It seems like if we fund facilities first and then we try to do the schools and the general government, we get kind of closer in the beginning, but then as we go out, it gets more of a problem. And that also assumes that our facilities numbers were all accurate. And if like we get hit by some huge, like the schools have, by a large utility budget bill, then I think that would potentially be a bigger problem if it were a shared expense.
But I think by having it as a separate department, I think we talked about this before, is that they're gonna have to go before the Finance Commission to fight for those funds. That they can't go to the general government side, give me 4,000, and go to the schools and you give me 6,000, and then I'm fine. That's just the way it is. You have a tough enough job dealing with your budget, Tony's got tough enough, and facilities are gonna have to fend for themselves and say, hey, this is what's going on. I need a reserve fund transfer or something from cash, whatever it is. They're gonna have to fight for themselves based on their own projections of expenses, so,
That's what we did. They had a separate budget.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
think that's,
I think it looks like
so unless
the
it's really.
3 departments
it seems like
below
it
the
does.
split
Yeah,
seems like
The way to go.
fairest way to go.
okay.
But Karen, earlier you had mentioned needing to sit down to decide what accounts would come out to become facilities. So we're suggesting these are the accounts.
Okay.
So,
Well, she has a list anyways, because from when we did the budget a year ago, I know Karen wasn't here.
yeah, so
But
I'm just saying, I
We
think
did review
it.
to know exactly what accounts are in the numbers. so
Not that she has any.
But not till
intent to do-
22,
Yeah,
right?
Right,
Right,
right.
well, so my
right.
question is, since I'm new to this process, I know we keep talking about delaying this till 22 to do management, but seems to me we kind of have the numbers, so what are we delaying? The 20 I guess I don't understand that
Okay,
part of it.
I'll summarize and the schools can chime in. I think the concern is that in a year where we have transitioned to Munis, and there's still a lot of issues, asking them to develop a budget and give up, not give up, but transfer $6 million to somebody else after a year in which we had an override that said, oh, we need this money to avoid issues with the public. We'd rather say, this is our step-by-step plan. In year 1, we're gonna develop the management side. In year 2, we're going to transition the budget numbers.
Yeah.
We didn't want to, you're
Okay.
still dealing with
That
munis
makes sense.
issues.
Yeah,
and-
most towns that have done it share management the first year, wait till that second year to share the actual budget. So at least for the first year, if Paul needs to get something done, he's familiar with his account codes, his account tree, where he can take it from, and he can contact just Kathy if he needs something on the general government side and say, Kathy, hey man, I got this big bill for something at the Civic, and she might say, okay, this is what this is how we do it, that's how we handle it. Just lets you focus on doing the job first, and then dealing with the accounting
Well,
later.
plus, this for fiscal '21, when we're projecting personnel, we're doing it the old way still, because in Munis, the position control stuff is not going into effect until
Right.
January.
Good.
So,
Timing's up.
that's another bolstering of that argument, that
Okay.
we're not quite ready to.
Plus, we'll go ahead, Paul.
Plus Paul's gonna have a lot to do that first
Yeah.
year.
So just on this sheet, where it lists all the expenses.
Yeah,
So on the top, we have the school maintenance, $512,000, and we have utilities, 1.4. And then when we go down to the town side, I look at the police and fire, I think I know the answer, but I look at the police and fire, and their maintenance budget is $451,000. Does that include utilities?
It might.
Do you recall?
I don't recall.
Because
Can look at
it would be, I think it would be beneficial to separate, because there's no category for utilities on the town side.
See, we don't separate it on what we used to call the old level two. It's all grouped into the repair and maintenance of the building.
Right.
So-
And then there's individual accounts.
Yeah, but maybe Molly needs to dig further in to look at that, because she really, we were thinking of personnel when I said
Right.
go through and look through that, so.
Well, we don't have it on the projection side, but we do know what the actual costs were for
Right.
FY '18.
We'd be raising rates
We
for
broke
payroll
out the
bills.
facilities.
Somebody did a history of
So
it.
Kathy did a lot of work, and so did like the light department, in trying to make sure that they could capture utility costs.
We
by
eventually
building.
will. I think that's one of the other reasons we want to
It'd be nice for the sheet
focus.
to be apples to apples.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I think we missed
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah.
we did miss that.
But eventually what you'll
I have
see
to
is,
run.
you know, again, electric repairs, and then it'll really be by facility, but we'll have a dollar amount for electric, or the electric bill, it'll say,
Yeah.
electric bill, $2 million, Balch, Civic, Town Hall, Airport, however it happens to.
And Munis will make it much easier for us to pull that.
Right.
Where in the old AMC system,
I'm good.
money
I'm
was
good. I wrote this
everywhere.
one.
Now we have the org that we're gonna, an object that we're gonna be able to
Yeah,
pull explicitly and make it easy.
Just so you know, when I first looked at this, I went, ooh, 512,000 for 9 buildings in the school, and look at the police and fire, 451,000 for maintenance. I'm saying to myself, well, I got a gold mine buried. You know, and then I look at the Civic for 195, so,
But
but
you also
I'm
have to-
assuming utilities are.
Right, and you have to
No,
look
you're-
too, because sometimes money for the budget, for general gov got put into their operating as opposed to in capital, or other places that it might be, so we really have to look carefully at what that money for public safety
Well, that
includes. It
creative
could
finance,
include several building projects, small projects within there, so
Right,
we need to see
yeah.
exactly where it was.
All right, so we'll go back and look at that again.
And it doesn't include any of the revolving that they dip into.
No,
right?
these are just
Right.
general fund. Motion to adjourn.
Is that all? I think that's all we had on the
That's it,
agenda.
yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
did that
I'm just not even being facetious.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned.